Hello and welcome to Abe's Complete Star Trek Commentary, where today we'll be discussing the next episode of Star Trek, the original series, first season, entitled Dagger of the Mind. Now, the Netflix summary on this one is that a deranged doctor escapes the Enterprise from a planetary penal colony. As Kirk investigates, he is brainwashed by the colony's maniacal director. Now, this is one that I have seen before, although granted it has been quite a while. I do remember liking this one, because it does become a force of will, so to speak, where the captain needs to somehow overcome the brainwashing that's been put on him. I seem to recall that it's some kind of Klingon brainwashing technique of some form from memory, but yeah, so now let's start watching this one and see what plot holes, pitfalls, pratfalls, and other interesting points we can pull from from this episode. So the episode opens up with a simple cargo transfer that's happening down to a penal colony. I find the name of the colony, as listed on the cargo containers, to be interesting, Tantalus, because as going back to, I believe it's Greek mythology for this one, the torment of Tantalus was constantly wanting to go somewhere or wanting to get something that was constantly out of reach. And kind of appropriate for a for a penal colony, because you're constantly not able to leave the colony and go where you really want to go. The transporter technicians are initially having some problems. Mainly because, simply, the shields are up. I mean, you wouldn't leave a penal colony unguarded, as it were, or kind of open to simple beam out for escape, because quite frankly that would just be too easy. And so there would be transporter inhibitors or security fields of some kind in place to prevent that from happening. Kirk comes in and kind of educates the transporter controllers to correct procedure to follow, and the cargo gets transferred and beamed down. They are also told to beam up, one container, which is clearly marked after beaming up, do not open, classified material. One of the two transporter technicians goes to get a vault assignment and I'm assuming a trolley or something to, kind of carry this box. It's not exactly the smallest thing in the world. And the other one is looking at the transporter control board along the back wall. Not noticing that some crazed, deranged-looking guy is slowly coming out of the box and walking over to him and knocks him out. And he's obviously not wanting to be seen, because as he starts to leave the transporter room, he sees some crew members walking by and ducks back in. But this guy does not have the sanest of faces. Grey hair and looking a little, I don't know, anyone ever look at the, imagine Professor Brainstorm, those books? I mean, they kind of reminds me as to what, he would look like. So we'll see what this crazy loon is going to do now that he's managed to escape the colony and beam up to the ship. So we get to the bridge of the ship, where Kirk and McCoy are talking. They're initially, Kirk just made the captain's log announcing that they've done the cargo transfer and that there was that he didn't beam down. And they've since left orbit and are on their way to their next destination. Kirk and McCoy are talking, and Kirk is saying he wishes he'd gotten to know Dr. Adams, that apparently whatever theories he's gone with, the Federation has gone with for locking up its criminal element, which does still exist, that since following Dr. Adams' kind of ideas that they're no longer as the harsh penal colonies that they once were, but they're more civilized, more like resort colonies. After that, they do get a call from the Tantalus colony advising that one of their inmates has escaped, possibly beamed up in the box, which we as the audience are well aware of. And we, Kirk initiates a search to try and find him. And then we go back to Crazed Old Man. We don't know his name yet, but Crazed Prisoner, who has changed uniforms with the transporter technician and is now wearing his engineering uniform. and wandering around the ship. He does get initially spied on deck 14, and they've sealed off the deck and are now continuing to search for him. I don't know what his game plan is. Getting outside the colony is one thing, but being able to go very far on a ship manned, by fully trained and experienced Starfleet officers, questionable at the very least. But let's see what kind of miracle this very silly man, is going to try and pull out. All right, so this guy manages to incapacitate a security officer and take his phaser, and then we get back to the bridge, where Kirk contacts Tantalus Colony to let them know that yes, they have got this guy aboard their ship, aboard his ship, and he is trying to track him down. He's being warned that he's clever and violent, and to kind of take all precautions, which Kirk is doing. He even gets a security officer on the bridge, facing, in my opinion, rather stupidly, away from the turbolift instead of facing the turbolift itself. Spock and McCoy, talk briefly, and Spock saying that you humans, kind of glorified organized violence for 40 centuries, but when you do it privately, it's a bad thing, which I don't disagree with. I mean, organized violence in the forms of military and war, official declarations of war between nations, in my opinion, is just moronic. I mean, we're all humans, we're all on this one planet, we've all got access to a finite number of resources, and yet because one person was born on the left side of the street and another person was born on the right side, means that person is deserving of death. That really makes a lot of sense to me. But anyway, Spock makes a comment that because there's no emotion, there's no motive for violence, which, again, I can disagree with, but I'll save that conversation for another day. But ultimately, after this, the turbolift doors open, the security guard gets incapacitated by Mr. Crazy Man, who's looking for Kirk, no doubt to try and order him to take him to a safe haven of some kind. But yeah, let's keep going. Well, I was not far wrong. He is asking the captain not to take him back to the Tantalus penal colony. He's obviously afraid of what was going on there. We do have a name for him now. It is Van Gelder. And Kirk and Spock going through a procedure or a dance that they've no doubt done a few times before. Kirk, keeping Van Gelder's attention and away from, and distracting him from what Spock's doing. Spock manages to get in range so that Kirk can kick the phaser out of his hand, and Spock does the good old nerve pinch to knock him out. And all injured parties now get taken to sickbay. So let's find out what he's so afraid of on the Tantalus colony. So in sickbay, Kirk is starting to is down there with McCoy, and it's trying to question the Simon Van Gelder, and it seems that every time they try to find out something personal about him, he seems to go into some kind of pain spasm, so that he can't clearly get out the sentences. He's like, I'm the director of, I was assistant to, I knew this, but he's not able to actually finish the sentences to clearly state or provide that kind of that information. So whatever has happened to him does seem to be, or at least whoever's done it, because there's no way that this would be a self-inflicted kind of ailment, for lack of a better term. It seems that they want to kind of prevent anyone from trying to get any pertinent or relevant information out of him, which does make it more dangerous going back to the Tantalus colony, because they're going back into essentially a situation in which they're blind. They don't know the clear details of what's happened or why. So let's keep watching and see if we can get some more information here in terms of how they were able to affect Simon Van Gelder as much as they did. So we're back on the bridge, and Spock is reviewing the identification tapes for Dr. Simon Van Gelder, who Spock is confirming is an associate of Dr. Adams. And so Kirk is contacting Dr. Adams to get some further information to find out how Dr. Van Gelder kind of got to the manic kind of state that he's in. And it gets determined that there was a beam of some kind that Dr. Van Gelder was experimenting with. He didn't want to try it on... he allegedly didn't want to try it on anyone else before trying it on himself first. He didn't feel he had the moral right to do that. The idea being that this being would rehabilitate incorrigibles, as they put it, which is obviously somehow had the opposite effect and kind of made him a sane person incorrigible. But as that conversation's going on, Bones has come onto the bridge and is saying, I can't quite put my finger on it, but that just doesn't sound right. There's something kind of going on down there, that we need more information on. Kirk, at kind of Spock's suggestion, tries to find out what Dr. Adams wants done with Dr. Van Gelder, and Dr. Adams is saying if there's a superior medical facility, please take him there. Otherwise, I suppose we'll take him back. And Bones also makes a comment to Kirk that I got my doubts about what you're about to do about sending him back there. There's more going on, and I'm going to note that in my log, and you're also required to respond to that in your log, so that there's documentation all along the way to say what doubts we're having and how we're how those are being addressed, which does make sense. Because any kind of, just to prevent any kind of miscommunication or misinterpretation of the events, kind of taking place. Okay, so Kirk has agreed to beam down with a minimal staff to investigate the Tantalus colony, and he asks Bones to find someone in his department who is trained not only in medicine but in penal procedure as well. They arrive back at the Tantalus colony and go down to the transporter room, and we find that the woman that has that's going to be going with them is someone that Kirk obviously has a history with. My guess is that history is romantic, given the kind of man that that he is. And that things may have been pleasant at the time, but the after effects are not so much, because he's now telling Spock to make sure that tell Bones that Dr. Noel had better work out to be the best assistant I've ever had. Like, how dare you put me with this person I'm trying to avoid? So they've beamed down to the colony, and let's find out what. So Kirk has beamed down and gone into a very fast elevator, one which does freak out Dr. Noel a little bit, but they arrive at the underground facility safely and are greeted by Dr. Adams, and middle-aged, older, seems to be in his 40s, kind of late 40s, and he's initially offering a toast. Kirk is going to check his weapon, but Dr. Adams tells him not to, just keep it out of sight. And we have our next new character, Lethe, who was apparently a prisoner or inmate there, but has since been rehabilitated and has stayed on as a therapist, which I kind of question a little bit. I mean, given the nature of the facility and the fact that it's so deep underground, leads me to believe that it's not exactly a low security facility. It would have to be a high security one, which means that the prisoners that are there would not be the non-dangerous type, also given the way that Simon Van Gelder has been behaving as either. And so if we want him to be kind of let loose as a therapist, I'd question that, but yeah, let's keep watching and see whether or not that was a smart or a rather silly decision. So after we find out that part of the therapy that that's happening at this prison is to essentially help people forget the past. I mean, if they there's no need to kind of dwell on their mistakes, and they should just focus on the positive effects of what their future can bring. Again, I understand the thinking, but I do have to disagree with it. Because if one does not remember the past, one is bound to repeat the same mistakes. Whereas if one does remember the past, one can learn from it and do better next time. So it's not that you dwell on the past, but it's more that you use those memories and those experiences to to learn and to do better. Hopefully, in a more positive sense, that you don't kind of commit the same acts again or a second time, and that you do become a better, more contributory member of society. After basic greetings and whatnot, Kirk and Helen are being given a tour of the Tantalus facility. I swear some of the outfits look like pajamas. But anyway, as they're walking past, Kirk is complimenting Dr. Adams on the impressiveness of the facility, and he walks past a room where there was a failed experiment going on. Helen is initially thinking, what's the point in looking at this? It's a failed experiment. If it's got no basis in science, there's no point in looking. To which Kirk quite rightly says that part of the benefit of being the captain is that I can listen to the advice and then make my own choice in terms of what I want to hear and what I don't. And so let's find out what this failed experiment was. So we go back onto the ship now, where Spock and McCoy are still continuing to question Dr. Van Gelder, and he mentions something about a neural neutralizer, something which he shouldn't have been subjected to. He's still unclear, not able to communicate clearly what's going on, and ends up needing to be sedated again. We then get back down to the facility, into the room where Dr. Adams, the technician, Helen, and Kirk are. Dr. Adams is telling them about the neural neutralizer room that they found that they're in, and Kirk is finding it a little bit interesting that Dr. Adams hasn't mentioned anything about how Dr. Van Gelder's accident occurred, and so it was actually in this room that he tried it in here alone and on full power for an unspecified period of time, which, given the fact that it takes two people to operate, the patient to be in the room and the technician at the control panel, I can't see how that would have been possible or even wise, and I can't see Dr. Van Gelder being that stupid. Put simply, that is making no sense, and so Dr. Adams is lying about something here, and we do get to see, the neural neutralizer in operation, and the patient that's in there is being given instructions that you'll forget everything you've heard, and trying to remember it will cause you pain, which does equate with Dr. Van Gelder's symptoms and the way that he's acting. Is that whenever he's trying to remember certain events, even personal details about his own life and about who he is, that it's that he's giving him these spasms. So whatever this device is, it works, and B, in a very dangerous way, because the stronger you try to remember, the greater your pain, and people's desire to remember different situations can be quite strong sometimes, to the point where this kind of thing could be potentially fatal. And so not exactly the smartest piece of technology to keep in operation and to keep lying around. I like the idea of rehabilitating prisoners, don't get me wrong. I do believe that people who've done wrong can be brought back to a contributory state for society, but I really don't agree with this as being a way to do it, because this kind of technology can very easily be abused. And let's see if that's what's happening here. So after this, Kirk and Spock are kind of conversing with Dr. McCoy, initially with Dr. Adams in the room, but Spock tells Kirk that they've learned about the neural neutralizer, and that Dr. Van Gelder is saying that it's dangerous. after Dr. Adams leaves the room, so that Kirk and Spock can talk a bit more freely, Spock tells Kirk that it seems to indicate that this neural neutralizer was the cause of Dr. Van Gelder's present condition. But Dr. Noel, Helen, is in very much in disagreement that and is being very defensive of Dr. Adams. Partially, it wouldn't have surprised me if there is some personal emotion mixed in here due to the previous relationship with Kirk, but she doesn't seem to be making a lot of sense when there's clear proof or evidence to say that that there's got to be more more than that's going on here than we've been told. She's being a little too adamant in my mind in terms of the innocentness, if you will, of the situation. She's being very naive. Kirk initially says that they'll be spending the night there, which I got to agree with Dr. Van Gelder's reaction, because he has he's quite adamant saying no, don't let them stay down there. You got to warn your captain. He tries to seem to indicate that Dr. Adams is involved somehow, and it wouldn't surprise me if Dr. Adams is actually the person who was at the control panel who caused Dr. Van Gelder's current condition. Who somehow he forced Van Gelder to sit in that chair while the neutralizer was being operated. As to the reasons why, I'm not sure whether it was just a test subject or whether there was more to it. We'll find out in due course, I'm sure. But I do agree that for the captain to stay down there in a prison colony at night, not exactly the smartest of choices. But let's see where this choice leads them. I gotta say, what happens next is extremely cool. So this is the first episode where we get to see a Vulcan mind meld. Not that it's called that at this point. And Spock does say that it's a private, personal thing to the Vulcans, which, given what we learn quite some time later in the Star Trek series Enterprise, which I will get to at some point, because there's a good several hundred episodes in between here and there. There was a big controversy around Vulcans who could meld, but again, I'll talk about that when I get there. And he's trying to find out from Van Gelder, trying to weed through Van Gelder's mind to the information to find out if what he's actually saying is real or delusion. So yeah, we get our first mind meld in this episode, which is cool. I was wondering when the first one happened. Okay, so while the mind meld is kind of being set up or established, we get a quick cut back down to Kirk on the planet, and he's gone to Helen's room to ask her opinion of what's going on. She is optimistic and, again, incredibly naive about it all. But Kirk is saying that that I'm not going to believe what's happening or what that machine does until I see it in operation myself, which I do understand. Because given the way Van Gelder's reacted, I do believe there's more going on here. And so with the meld, we go back to Spock and Van Gelder with the meld, and in his most lucid kind of way, because Spock's helping him, we find out that it was Dr. Adams who essentially did what he did, that he erased some of Van Gelder's memories and replaced them with his own thoughts and desires and whatnot, his own memories. And so the danger of that machine is becoming pretty self-evident now. Kirk and Helen have gone to the neutralizer room, and Kirk, moronic of moronic, really. This plot hole, I don't know, what do you want to call it? I just want to call it, you stupid idiot, Kirk. Putting yourself right in the direction of this thing, all it would take would be one person to follow, would be Dr. Adams to follow. He could easily incapacitate Helen. She's obviously not a big fighter at all. Or even worse, just say, let me take over. Just be completely innocent about it all. Because Dr. Helen essentially worships the ground he walks on. And Kirk will easily find himself in the line of fire. And he put himself there. I mean, really, there's got to be archival tapes and historical and records that he would be able to view, which would be just as effective and just as useful, rather than putting himself in that kind of position. Not smart for a starship captain. I mean, come on. So, Kirk, being in the danger seat, so to speak, was initially trying it out with Helen with just a few harmless suggestions. He's hungry. It's just a low-intensity thing first, and to which he forgot. He didn't realize that it happened, or that particular memory of it being used was erased. And then a slightly more unusual suggestion where Helen was manufacturing a memory of a more intense kind of evening at the Christmas party where they initially met. And then just after this, or while this is going on, boom, 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 as I suspected, Dr. Helen Noel, naive scientist to the stars, ends up being taken away from the controls, and Dr. Adams is going to start to do dastardly things to the captain's brain. What a shocker. Did not see that one coming a mile away, did we? So the first initial suggestions are that Kirk's feelings for Helen grow more and more intense, and then and then all of a sudden she's gone, and we can see the captain reacting to those suggestions. Then Dr. Adams turns the intensity up and tells Kirk to drop his phaser and then his communicator. Phaser he does. He's a little resistant, but with the communicator he tries to contact the Enterprise, but ends up being put into some rather intense pain as a result. And Dr. Noel, Helen, is finally starting to realize the dark side of Dr. Adams' research. Can't believe it took her this long, and said she's the naive doctor to the stars. It's going to take me a while to get over this particular point, but yeah, Kirk ends up surviving that, and we're now in a cabin where he is recovering from his ordeal. So in his quarters where he's recovering, he initially reacts to the false memories, but Helen manages to get him back to his sane semblance of self. And he sends Helen through the air conditioning ducts to try and short out the security field, to try and find where the power source is, so that the security field can be disabled, so that Kirk can be beamed up from the surface. I find it very funny that have you ever, when he asked Helen, have you ever been trained or know how to use these power circuits, and she's like, no, not a clue. But then again, what choice does he have? He needs to find a way to escape from here and survive the neutralizer. Just after she crawls in, he gets taken away for another treatment in the neutralizer. And so let's see what new suggestions Dr. Adams has for him. So during this next session, Dr. Adams is kind of gloating a little bit here, and also saying, thank you for being another excellent specimen for me to experiment with. And Lethe, the prisoner turned therapist, comes in and says that Dr. Helen is gone, and now the facility is being placed on alert. Dr. Adams is trying to find out from Kirk, what instructions Helen has gone away with, but Kirk won't reveal them. Got to admit, given the nature of the technologies, I'm finding his resistance to be quite impressive and quite amazing, but certainly not complaining about the fact either. But let's see if he can hold out for the few minutes he needs to, so that the Helen can do what she needs to short out the power, so that the cavalry can come marching in. So I love it how these air vents, which could essentially go anywhere in the facility, she manages to find the right path to get to the power room, and she starts to kind of play around with some things to try and short out the power. She runs and hides when she hears people coming, but goes back to what appears to be the main power source. And while she's fighting off one of the people who's trying to stop her, she manages to shut off the power temporarily so that Kirk can incapacitate the technician and Dr. Adams that are torturing him. And then in the ensuing struggle, Helen is able to knock this guy into the high voltage thing, which ends up frying him and killing him. So she's now got a death on her, in self-defense on her conscience. And Kirk, and this also causes the force field to be dropped as well. So let's find out what how the last few minutes of the episode go, and then I'll give my final few words and comments. So in the last few minutes, Spock beams down, shuts off the force field, turns the power back on, which includes the neural neutralizer as well. And I find it interesting that the technician is gone from the room, but Dr. Adams is still in there and ends up being knocked out by this thing. Helen makes her way back to the captain's quarters, where Kirk has managed to get himself back to. And Kirk initially, after pulling her out of the vent, starts to make out with her for a little bit. And she's a little accepting of this, but also resistant too, because she realizes it's a fake memory that Doc Adams has put into his mind. Right at that point, Spock walks in and is like, "Yeah, I knew it. I knew I'd find you making out with a girl. Typical of that. That's just typical Kirk, isn't it?" Kirk then starts to come back to his senses and goes back to the treatment room with Spock and Helen to find Doc Adams has actually been killed by his own device. And so the episode ends with Kirk returning to the bridge of his ship. You can tell he's been affected by what happened to him. And they were initially questioning how Van Gelder. Initially, they were questioning how Doc Adams, could have died because the machine wasn't apparently at high enough a setting to do that kind of damage. But Kirk does make the connection that it is possible to die of loneliness when you're sitting in that chair when you've had your mind emptied by the neutralizer. They have a comment, a transmission message from Tanler's colony saying that the machine has been dismantled. So, as for my final thoughts and comments, I do, as I've mentioned before, I do, like the idea of rehabilitating prisoners, and it was fine in theory, but the practice and the way that he was going about it was, I do agree, very incorrect. He was letting the power that he had over people's minds corrupt him, and instead of using it to try and rehabilitate people to be contributing members of society, he was using it to his own selfish ends. And so that kind of technology can be used right and safely, but was just being very much abused in this case. Once again, I have enjoyed going through this episode with you. If you do want to contact me, feel free to leave some feedback on the Apple Store, podcast store there. Or you can contact me on at my email, which is warrior346yahoo@yahoo.com. Or you can contact me on my Twitter feed, which is at warrior346. I thank you all for listening. Live long and prosper, and Kapla.